How I attended the school of Giannizzeri and then became the first contributor to the Great Vizier Socollu. All the most exciting part of the novel because Marino, when the hostage survivors return to Sorrento, refuses to return too. It has already been converted to Islam and therefore preferred to stay in Istanbul. Costas, his weapon teacher, was a man important of the arms of the Sultan. Suleiman was appointed as head of Giannizzeri, and then Marino, under the protection of his old teacher, he attended the Accademia of Giannizzeri. Following is noticed by the third vizier, who was the great Sokollu Mehmet Pasha. He also Greek Orthodox family, is brought to Istanbul, educated in Giannizzeri, then makes his rise as Piale Pasha, then all the commands of the Ottoman Empire were in the head of a few Muslim of origin, but almost all converted or Orthodox Christians who were transferred from small to Turkey. Noted by this vizier, Marino passes from a military career to a career in politics and diplomacy. Then Sokollu married the daughter of the heir to the throne and ascended to the role of the Great Vizier, followed by Marino. An extraordinary character who inspired his political philosophy, religious tolerance, being of the Orthodox Christian origins. It arises that the Ottoman Empire would hold up with a policy of peace in the Mediterranean and alliance with Venice. Unfortunately, he will not be heard at some stage, so went on a rampage in new wars. First, with an attempt to siege of Malta, then with the conquest of Cyprus, but remained at the top Sokollu, Marino and followed his career. Then the successor of Sultan Suleiman wanted Marino, went on aboard the flagship. We commanded the fleet, then Khalid at the time, when Marino was engaged to Lepanto. And before that the battle comes the new that changed his life, because during the boom, him having been in a political diplomatic mission to Venice, having suffered an attack. The novel is full of twists and turns, returns and convalescence, is treated in a palace of Princess Mirima, the daughter of Soliman, who was ran for the harem. He is taken care of by one of the adopted daughters, Princess Jasmine Sultan, fall in love and then get married. This is the story of love then within. The news of the death of his wife and child during childbirth joined him on the day before the Battle of Lepanto. Then he captured and tried by the Great Spanish Inquisition. Another scenario which focuses, however, the other party, the Catholic of human Marino. When Marino converted to Islam and why it take the name of Amir el-Kamar, That means the Prince of the Moon. What role does the moon in his imagination? During the preparation by his teacher of arms, Marino raises question. Begin to learn Arabic, reads the Quran. He discovered that there is another world, another dimension, behind the propaganda opposing another culture, including religion. Since this is curious, when he is brought to Istanbul, he decides to continue this path, and that's because 2 years later, when the hostage survivors returned to Sorrento, he preferred to stay in Istanbul. But the decision to convert to Islam occurs during the return on the fleet of Piale Pasha. Because after the sacking of Massa Lubrenza and Sorrento, the stationing in Procida wait for the ransom, the fleet head up in Tyrrhenian Sea. Here is blocked because the looting of the Ligurian coast come a Genoese ambassador and writes of a sort of a maritime armistice so Piale Pasha toward the Balearic Island, the fleet and their stormed Minorca, where they make thousands of prisoners. A massacre worse than that of Sorrento. Then they decide to re-enter and stop at Stromboli, one of the most beautiful scenes of novel, in front of the Sciara del Fuoco. This also allows me to speak of natural elements in the Arabic philosophy. Just in front of the fire, with a full moon, it confirms the fascination for the moon at Marino. Even in the scene of the rides with his fencing, in the years before the moon is present at the tip of Campanella, that is, on the promontory of Minerva, in front of Capri.
La luna è presente alla punta della campanella, cioè sul promontorio di Minerva di fronte a Capri.
The moon is in front of the rocks of the Queen Giovanna, the promontory of Santa Fortunata. In the imagination of Marino, the moon is a symbol of femininity. It is also in ancient culture and the Arab court. Not surprisingly, then, the name of a princess that protected the Sultan daughter is Mirima, and Mirima in Turkish means the moon and the sun. And then there is this sort of understanding, involvement, because the Admiral Piale Pasha that night, when the weapon teacher tell him that Marino has decided to convert to Islam and explain the fascination that feeds to the moon, this guy, who is 18 years old, the show glowing in the waters of Stromboli. Fire, tell him, you will be called Amir el-Kamar, Prince of the Moon. So Marino had 3 names in the novel. The first is called Marino, baptized as a Christian, then converted to Islam by Amir el-Kamar, and then when it is reconciled with the Christian faith and it will go into a convert, will be named in honor of the patron saint of Sorrento, Fier Antonius. Of course, all these has the purpose not only narrative, but the 3 names represent this path religious and cultural. Although the 3 names is always Marino, that is a Christian. Tell us about the love affair with the niece of the Sultan Suleiman, of marriage, and the tragic ending with the death of the wife and his son. This is the heart of the romantic novel. I would say that is the element that creates the subtitle to the novel. Marino falls in love with this royal princess, who reciprocates during the recovery period after undergoing careful in Venice, under the protection of Avalin Sultan, who was a witty and influential. The daughter of Suleiman Pasha had married Rustem, one of the most powerful Great Vizier, who had since died, but who had become rich because the Grand Vizier were not subject to persecution as it does now. They sold their opportunities. An appointment as a governor in the scale of power involved in revenue, not only for Speaker Ottoman, but also for their own.
ma anche per la ricchezza personale dei visir e dei gran visir. Quindi le loro ricchezze erano state
So their riches were exaggerated. The Mirma princess, daughter of the Suleiman, after his mother's death, the great Roxelana, she became the leader of the weapons.
poi eredita tutte le
Then she inherits all the wealth of her husband, who was the Grand Vizier.
figlie femmine
And then you will understand that the Great Vizier married a woman of the royal family to create the
lotta capi delle
intervening political reality. So every impression brings wealth,
solo
not only the empire, but also personal. This princess sees this falling in love in an extraordinary way, because the girl was a North African origin, with ebony skin, hair blacks, deep eyes.
con la pelle, diciamo, d'ebano, capelli neri, occhi profondi, lui era
He was a psychically powerful blonde with blue eyes. Then the princess sees this love in another way to strengthen the imperial family. However, this extraordinary love ends, as I said before, with tragic news.
questo amore straordinario si conclude, come ho detto prima, con una notizia tragica, che lui è costretto a partire
He is forced to leave for the coming Battle of Lepanto, because by the successors of Suleiman.
scopriranno per quali ragioni.
Then readers will discover the why. Since this is also a thriller. Then the news of the death of his wife and child during childbirth establishes him in a crisis, which led him to immediately abandon to fate experience. But it leads to a deep crisis, with the existential question, which then represents to Earth the backbone, the ideology of this novel.
La spina dorsale, diciamo, l'ideologia di questo romanzo.
Marino is captured by the Spanish in Lepanto.
Dopo la notizia della morte,
After the news of the death of his wife and son,
una missiva che gli invia
who comes to him with a letter which comes to him from Istanbul, which sent the Princess Mirima, the Valin Sultan, is collapsed.
va in una crisi irreversibile perché
He sinks into a reversible crisis because the rise of political, social, his biggest claim to court. They had alluded to have found the call of happiness, love with Jasmine, the expectation of the child. But as in all things human, the divine providence provides otherwise. Indeed, a Jesuit who will assist him during his long imprisonment in the Escorial will tell him so many things in our life. When they happen, we do not understand. We cannot understand. We understand when it develops in the future of the existence, and it is understood that divine providence has conducted events for the salvation of our soul.
in futuro la nostra esistenza e si capisce che la divina provvidenza ha condotto gli eventi per la salvezza della nostra anima. È un
He is a deep religious convict that I have, and of course, I moved in the affair of the protagonist. So the love story translates
storia d'amore
into a tragedy. He, instead of facing the battle on board the flagship after the 5-hour battle in Lepanto, which result immediately in favor of the admiral, is essentially John of Austria. He is captured.
Eccellenza Don Giovanni d'Austria. Lui si lascia catturare e direi che stava per essere
And I would say that was about to be shot to death when his weapon teacher we became head of the Janissary.
per salvare Marino. Quindi Marino si salva ancora una volta.
So Marino is saved once again providentially. Is captured after the news because he want to die,
Che stanno accadendo,
does not want to save itself.
vuole morire nella battaglia, non vuole salvarsi. Ma la provvidenza
But the Providence decide otherwise. His weapon teacher saves him.
ai ferri
Is captured. It put in irons the flagship of Giovanni of Austria.
sono le due ammiraglie. L'area
There they face the two flagship, the real with a flag with the crucifix blessed by the Pope, and on the other the white flag of the old title of Allah embroidered by hand the woman of the feet. Before attacking, the Turks reacted, and then the Christian with the captured on Marino, which is shipped
migliaia di volte di Allah.
with the other prisoner in Madrid, where he was brought to trial by the Spanish Inquisition.
Sulle le due ammiraglie che si scontrano e si incastrano con l'arrembaggio che prima tentano i turchi e vengono respinti e poi i cristiani. E poi c'è la morte dell'ammiraglio, la morte del capo dei Giannizzeri che salva la vita a Marino, la cattura di Marino. Marini viene catturato, messo ai ceppi e spedito coi prigionieri a Madrid, dove viene sottoposto ad un processo
As a renegade Christian.
di Inquisizione spagnola, come
At that moment still does not abandon the Christian faith,
ancora lui non
but after a subsequent
la fede
crisis will convert back to Catholicism.
successiva crisi.
As said the great inquisitors, then be reconciliated with Christian faith.
Come dicevano allora i grandi inquisitori, si riconcilierà con la fede cristiana. Ma tutto questo
But all this is part of a large diplomatic game between King Filippo.
tra il re Filippo
We keep him in the prison of the Re Escorial,
Escorial
and Great Vizier Socollu, we does everything from Istanbul to free him.
il Gran Visir
The Great Vizier Socollu
al re di
offered to the King of Spain assuming gold without limits in order to redeem his collaborator. But Filippo II, whether because he wants to make a political hostage diplomatic.
quindi come
So the story is a political thriller,
la storia è un thriller
and that connects to the historical events
ma che si collega
in a documented way.
vicende storiche in maniera documentata. Come diviene uno
How to become a wood sculptor creating a growing Madonna appreciated by Filippo II of Spain?
questa è la grande
This is the great turning point. I will say that is the last step, because after the conviction to imprisonment for life, so that they may represent and come to faith in the risen Christ.
alla fede in Cristo risorto.
The king, however, wants him a political hostage. It does hold the prison of the palace, the Escorial. In the same cell is also a student of Berrughete, one of the greatest artists of the century.
Alonso Berruguete è uno dei più grandi artisti del secolo spagnolo, autore
Author of the retablo,
la grande
the great representation of the life and sacrifice of Christ carved in wood.
intagliata nel legno. Poi chi conosce Berruguete capisce. Questo
This prisoner, older than him,
che si trova
continue to work sacred image in wood.
continua a lavorare immagini sacre in legno che poi il re
which then gives the king to convents, monastery. The climate court was very stiff. Up to a certain point, Marino remained linked to the faith to which he converted. Then the princess Mirma dies. Also the Greek vizier Socollu, murdered by a dervish.
da un derviscio proprio il gran visir Socollu, cioè il suo protettore.
It is a moment of crisis for Marino,
Crisi per Marino, perché
because his imagination,
nell'immaginario di Marino il gran visir
the great vizier Socollu, with its religious storylines, is the symbol of what could be the future. No wars, no one god exploited by various monotheistic religions,
dal potere
from political power.
ma muore proprio l'uomo
He was assassinated by a dervish,
assassinato da un derviscio.
who had asked him in a mosque, a charity,
In una moschea un'elemosina
and the great vizier was giving him alms, but this struck him to death.
questa notizia arriva,
The news comes at Escurial.
cioè gli ultimi
The last emotional ties are truncated.
giornali si troncano, morta la moglie,
His wife died, his son, the Greek patron, the great vizier, is a strong crisis, because
comincia a ragionare,
begin to reason.
prende la lettura della
Resume a reading of the Bible, read The Prince by Machiavelli, then begin the question of power and religion.
interrogativi sul rapporto,
That is the great drama of that century.
cioè il grande dramma di quel secolo.
At the end,
Si allontana
moves away from the daily practice of prayer and accept the offer of Berrughete students,
Berrughete che sta con lui nella cella,
who had invited him several times to learn how to carve wood.
impara a intagliare, impara a scolpire il legno con me.
In this existential emptiness, and he accepted Jesuit who assist him, like other confessor, dogmas, ask him to sculpt the plane that a mother for the death of his son, that is, Our Lady of Sorrow.
Il dolore di una madre per la madre, cioè Maria addolorata, cioè l'addolorata. Credo che tra i miei
I think that among my fellow there is a little to explain what this represents for our religion tradition.
la nostra tradizione, cultura religiosa,
And Marino sculpted this Madonna without revealing it to anyone.
e lui scolpisce questa Madonna senza farla vedere. Poi questo Gesù
The Jesuit then go to Sorrento and is among those trying to buy the land of Massa Lubrense, where it will then build the monastery of the Jesuit.
dei Gesuiti, che poi viene trasferito
Then he was transferred to Brazil,
una lettera a Marina dicendo
when he wrote to Marino to know that he had finished to stay to, and also the process.
che hai concluso anche il tuo processo di
Advises him to ask his new spiritual assistant to donate the statue, along with the demand for freedom, to King Filippo. The statue was brought to the king, that he was impressed enough to get a place in the royal chapel and signed the decree for the release of Marino and his cellmate. Marino, however, instead of going back to Sorrento, go to the Benedictine monastery of San Juan de la Peña, who is on the road of a pilgrim to Galicia, where he is buried, St. James. Santiago de Compostela. It is clear that I have tried to include in this story of the great path to conversion to Catholicism.